Good afternoon. This is Georgia Peachcast coming to you from Cherokee County, Georgia. This is our fourth episode, and this is Pat,
This is Will.
And this is Liev.
and we are going to talk, as always, about community and local national issues, as well as activities that are of interest to everyone. Tonight, we were going to talk about AI, which about is a broad a spectrum of a subject that you can have in this day and age because AI is getting involved and is already involved across the board. So,
I think within this context, we should talk more about like AI as far as manufacturing, writing, artistry, just about anything that generative AI could be doing to impact people's careers across the spectrum.
So we're talking text, pictures, and videos. Is that
And
right?
and more, there's a lot more. There are other things that you could do with AI too.
Writing songs, actually putting them together.
Yeah,
making movies with people that really weren't in the movie. Uh, I remember seeing some broadcast either on 60 Minutes or something where they could actually make a complete movie with Tom Cruise and Tom Cruise never being involved in the movie at all. And they've got so much data on Tom Cruise that they can plug into AI, and everything you go to look at, you're going to see his motions, his voice inflections, and there's not going to be a lot of people that are going to be able to know it's not him.
but is that work done through you put in a prompt and Tom Cruise is on the screen with like lines? Because I don't know, I don't think that we're there yet, but within 10 years, if that's where the technology goes and
Oh,
there is,
absolutely.
yeah, if there is like an incentive to make something that does generate Tom Cruise, I don't know, flipping burgers at like a movie restaurant or something, I feel like that is a real possibility.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's a possibility.
But
It's headed that way.
but we're not there yet.
No, and that was a one instances that somebody had actually done. Um, but somebody put the effort into doing it. But it's not commercially available, or somebody hasn't put enough money into behind it to actually go ahead and produce a movie with fake act. I'm calling them fake actors, but they're I. So you're right. That probably hasn't taken place, but it's just an indication of where it's going to go.
But they've had the technology to do something like that ever since Disney started doing this with the Star Wars movies. Like some time ago, they would deep fake dead actors, and that was like a whole controversy that they kind of had to sort through when they deep faked, I think, Peter Cushing for one of the Star Wars movies.
So there is the issue of our economy and jobs, what that does to the world of actors and directors. Then there's what happens when people think a video is real and it's not, and it sways public opinion on political issues, social issues. And then, of course, there is the issue of the environment and the intensive energy needs of generative AI.
And and fact that manufacturing is going to be using AI, and how many jobs is that going to take away? But invariably, they talk about technology. Doesn't matter if it was 100 years ago or it's present days. That technology is just going to take jobs away from people, which specifically in certain instances it does, and then it just creates jobs at the other end of the spectrum. And as we all know, that even with AI or with the robots that are coming out now that are doing part of the manufacturing, unemployment, at least in this country, is at the low end. So it's certainly not affecting employment. It may be
Yet,
difficult specifically. Go ahead.
it's not affecting employment too much yet. But the fascinating thing about AI and scary thing about it is that it learns so fast.
Yeah.
But it's prone to making mistakes, and where I think that AI is never going to completely take over people's jobs is the liability. You can't really assign blame to an AI the way that you can to a
Hmm.
human worker. Because if you're in a
Right.
factory, somebody makes a mistake, they just get reprimanded or fired or whatever. If an AI makes a mistake, that goes to the top level, whoever was in charge of putting that AI in place.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah.
So we're looking at the equivalent of replacing individual cashiers and their individual checkout lanes with the self-checkout, and we're looking at one person kind of supervising at that kind of meta level. But in this case, it's AI content and robots, right? Where there are a lot of supervisors. And so what is everyone going to be a programmer or else a janitor or a farmer in this life? But if you're not one of the maintenance types, construction types, electricians, plumbers, then you're a programmer and that's it.
It's a possibility.
Mm,
I mean, time can really tell how exactly everything could and would shift.
right.
Yeah. And as we were talking a few minutes ago, to figure out what controls or what do's and don'ts are allowed on AI, or what AI is going to be able to do and not do because of the liability in some instances is going to be very difficult because of the extent of which AI can get into our lives in a daily basis. So, as we said, to try
Yeah.
to control that, well, what was the word you were using? We were talking about,
Supervising it, basically, programming it,
yeah,
as Will was saying. And I personally, I am a hypnotist and I do self-help content. And just out of curiosity to wonder, out of the curiosity that I could be replaced by AI, creating scripts and having a voice or even an animated character, it refused. It would not provide me with a hypnosis script for anything, even just a guided meditation. So that was interesting. It needs that human understanding of what can happen in hypnosis and as a result of hypnotic post-hypnotic suggestions. But things might change very quickly. Maybe all of a sudden AI will be providing hypnosis scripts.
which brings up how AI is going to be used medically. It's already being used in some cases already, but then also back to the liability situation. Suppose AI is used in an operation, some form, and it screws up. Where does the liability fall then?
It would fall on hospital administration,
Yeah,
and that is the last thing that they would ever want.
right. So again, it's a subject that is not going to end up being resolved or known to the nth degree for a long, long time. And even then, who knows? It's going to be beyond a lot of us time wise for when it gets to that point. So it's going to be in our lives. There's no doubt about it. The question is to what extent and how much is controls are put on it to limit it to it doesn't go to the somehow or another to the extent of running our lives and replacing all of us completely.
And there are also interesting limitations to AI itself. Like there are some things that it refuses to do. Sometimes it gets things wrong. I guess so do people, granted. But sometimes you can't quite dictate it exactly to get what you need. You kind of have to make some concessions or work around it in some senses, or even just start over if you have to. Like we're still yards away from, and I'm a developer, so we're still a long ways away from somebody being able to say, hey, generate me a phone app that can detect the nearest tree or whatever. That you can't just go into ChatGPT and say, give me that app, and it gives you exactly what you want. You still need to put in a lot of the work to actually do that app. It does help, and it helps with like smaller stuff, but we're not there quite yet where it can do that.
Now, since I'm not a technical person, and probably a lot of our audience is not technical, are you saying that that app consists of the code, or are there, different types of code that need to be coordinated, or
So you would kind of need to start with like a project in some sort of software. I don't know much about mobile development specifically, but
Mhm.
you would kind of need that framework to start in, and that's where you can use ChatGPT to say, "Hey, get me like a template to use Xcode." But then you also have to figure out how to publish it, how to compile it, where it's supposed to go, what the
That's what
code's
I
supposed to
meant.
do. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. And so that seems like a lot for AI to manage.
Well, it supposedly again learns from its own mistakes and or our mistakes, and I think it'll be eventually. It actually eventually will. Does it really correct itself if it does make a mistake, as if it was a human, and go back and recorrect itself, or does somebody have to actually indicate, say it, or input it, or somehow or another let it know it made a mistake before it corrects itself?
You do have to tell it, but I'm actually really glad that you brought that up as an idea because AI's been around for long enough. And since AI trains itself on data all across the internet, it's now getting information from other AIs. So it's starting to poison itself and it's getting more and more stuff wrong because it's getting information basically from itself.
Well, and I think a question that has been nagging at the back of my mind is AI vulnerable to misuse and disinformation at the kind of Wikipedia level, where people are just, or due to the information, the disinformation that's out there, AI is feeding on the disinformation at least as much as everything else that's out there.
I guess it largely depends on which model is being used, but by and large, it can feed off of mis and disinformation.
Right. It's just taking in everything. It doesn't know, at least not yet, what is credible information, what is biased.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking about how does it determine which is what, but how does it know to go to fact check something that it just threw out there? Does it is there a way in which to program it so that there anything that it's getting ready to put out there in whatever form it is there a way to say that to the AI that you have to check it through this medium or input?
Or at least
It seems to me to be
following,
a way that you could be done.
at least maybe it should be legislated that any AI needs to be programmed to understand and to root out conflicts of interest, other biases, logical fallacies, that should be the precondition. If you have AI, that would be one regulation that would have to be put in place.
I think there is a degree of fact checking or something that it does to ensure that the data is good enough,
Well,
I
and
guess,
how
because
interesting if suddenly our fears about AI with deep fakes and God knows what it could do to society, if instead we can use AI as the purest arbiter of the truth, as long as I guess the programming is transparent, showing that, its fundamental underlying rules include, you're going to look for a conflict of interest, you're going to follow the money, you're going to look for logical fallacies, you're not going to fall prey to logical fallacies. Whatever that bedrock
Yeah,
is, that could actually bring both sides of the aisle together. That could solve a lot of problems in our society, especially here in the United States.
you could throw in history, which AI is now pretty much. I don't know if it's now or that there's going to be enough information in AI data on history that has what it covered all the books in the in the National Library. It has the ability to know everything digitally there. So to say that any subject that you got to first look at anything that you're talking about, Liev, is that it goes through that process, and then if it's something that could be historically accurate or inaccurate, it would automatically know that it is fact.
Right.
Historical fact is historical fact. If you can now somehow or another have the AI saying, okay, that's one of the fact checks that you do. You look at history on any subject, and then if it's a historical situation, okay, that becomes a fact check, along with all the other possibilities that you just talked about.
So there's that also brings up an interesting point, like a thought that I've had, is that even despite all this research, all this information that's being put into AI, it's also grabbing stuff from like Reddit or basically anywhere on the internet where there is information to be had, and sometimes it's completely wrong, sometimes it's a joke
So it is kind of like Wikipedia.
in a sense, but Wikipedia, I don't know how well ChatGPT, for example, is moderated compared to Wikipedia, but Wikipedia has like people manually checking these articles and making sure that the information is good and,
To
sounds.
standard,
Yeah,
yeah.
they vet information pretty well. But going back to like ChatGPT, where their information may not be vetted as well as it would be somewhere else, you could potentially have something called a hallucination. So if like some comment on like Instagram or something says Abraham Lincoln loved the Baconator, ChatGPT might be able to pick that up and somehow feed that to you
Right,
in like a biography about Abraham Lincoln. He just mentions he's just a huge fan of Baconators.
right, right.
Yeah, it's good to come up with scenarios that are kind of funny, and because a lot of it's going to be dead serious and cause a lot of problems in a lot of different areas.
Well, I can only imagine that programmers are programming their AIs to look out for those weird outliers and actually be able to discount them. But then what happens when there is some great new thought, some great new who knows what? Then could that be discounted as an outlier too, though?
That is true.
And maybe in a kind of algorithmic sense is suppressed. I'm not saying suppressed in any political sense, of course.
Yeah, like purely this is not good information and it needs to be, brushed aside.
Right. And it's sort of like mutations. Most outliers are going to be just kind of dross or trash, right? Litter in the universe and the cosmos. But some mutations enter into our evolutionary code.
Yeah,
And
that is more or less how machine learning works, which is I guess that's largely a different thing compared to like the generative AI and things like that. But when you're doing machine learning, you have a code and you say, okay, tell me the difference between X and Y, and it can't on the first run, like the first 100 or so,
mhm,
but it'll make slight changes to the code itself
mhm,
until it can, tell the difference between X and Y.
right.
I think we could go on forever with talking about all the ands and ifs that's going to come along, but it's something that's really going to impact us, and we have to stay on top of it, or at least know from a personal standpoint, and also from businesses have to be aware and watching out for how it's going to be used and where it should be used and where it shouldn't be used. Politicians are going to have to look at what limitations do you put on it, where do you put those limitations. Yeah.
Right, because as we were talking about, as we were setting up, and I mentioned just because we can do something doesn't mean that we always should.
No.
Right. So there's a lot of questions about regulation.
And there could always be the possibility of somebody like in the government or, some other actor that says, "Hey, I'm going to give you $25 million to favor one viewpoint over another."
Right. So how do we protect this technology from that kind of corruption?
Right. And how can we make it more efficient? And that's, going back to the whole impact on the environment issue.
Right. And what are we talking about here? They have the cooling systems, and those require a lot of water. And then once that water runs through the system, I guess it's not as clean. It's certainly not potable. What do you do with it? And then there's the climate effects because it's so energy intensive. So
Right.
apparently it's very bad when we're looking at climate change. And for something so energy intensive, I don't know that there's really any offsetting that can be done.
They could switch over to like solar power, wind, cleaner alternative energies than like burning coal to ask a dumb question to ChatGPT.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't read or understood the how that the water that the obviously the processing systems and the data centers are taking a tremendous amount of water because they generate so much heat that they need the water to cool it. And I didn't even think about the fact that the water is not usable from a standpoint of maybe drinking, but is that same water usable for irrigation?
Right. And so then there's even more energy expended to process the water.
Yeah,
So it's a lot.
it is.
To process the, well, I'm kind of thinking here, like specifically with regard to like the water cooling of like these data processing centers, but I can only imagine to myself it's heat and not really much else other than water.
It might be the pipes, it might be who knows what that the water is exposed to, but then it's not the same as what I've heard. But I came here
Right.
today not knowing I'd be behind the mic on AI. It's not my specialty.
No, and it makes sense that if it's run through a system, okay, it's going to change some of the molecule, you know,
It's picking up
and that
metals.
yeah, that to me is logical, and I'm not an expert in that area from far from it, but it just seems to me common sense to some degree that water makeup of that water is going to be changed somewhat. Now, how much and how much is affected, how much it would take to take that out, that change that back to just its normal clean self, I don't know, but it certainly is certainly another subject that's going to be involved. And going back to AI, it's the data centers that are being created in order to have AI continue to improve, get better and higher and spread out. So yeah, water in an environment is definitely going to be part of the whole AI system,
Yeah, and I think it has to be addressed sooner rather than later before all this generative AI does too much damage to the point of no return.
which is what they've been saying about the environment. Period. Okay, and that's a whole nother subject. But the idea is to get ahead of it, or although a lot of us think that we're already too late. But that's another subject, and we don't want to belabor this one. All right, people, I think we've done enough for tonight. Probably confused half the audience as to what they should be thinking about and doing. But we just wanted to bring up this subject because it's something that we're going to live with, and might as well continue having conversations about it. So have a good evening, and we'll catch you next week.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
There you go.
And share.
And share. Don't forget share.
Okay.
And add to the conversation. How do you feel about AI? Is it wonderful? Do you have reservations about it? Just let us know in the comments.
Go.